was kind of like, in a daze for a second. I could hear people say, "Hey, are you all right?" And that was it. I was out, and I was, knocked out. And I woke up on a gurney in a certain way, being led to the, emergency room. And I was awake to a certain extent, but I was also not awake. I could tell that I was in between, a sense of physical reality and subconscious reality, or the depths of understanding the inner levels of mind. I could tell that I was in this space where I could go either way. If I would have just let go, I would have either went into a coma or I would have left the physical. I'm not 100% sure, but I could fully tell that I had a choice.
You're listening to Inspire Me with Jay, where science meets spirit and stories of meditation and the near-death experience awaken what's possible within us all. I'm Jay, and this is your moment to be inspired. Welcome to Inspire Me with Jay. I'm your host, Jay Spillers. I have a guest today. He does breathwork, meditation, hypnosis, and he's had healing with it, and he's going to tell you about it. Why don't you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, hi. My name is Terrence Lamont Bellows, and I live in St. Louis right now. I'm 47 years old. I've been actually a teacher of metaphysics, and I've been an actor since I was 8, actually. And so I've had lots of different experiences. I used to live in the country areas of Oklahoma, out down by, like, in between Norman and the Red River. And so I had a lot of adventures and different things down in that area. That's where I grew up. Right now, though, I am in St. Louis, and I've been studying and basically operating and learning more about the world with an organization called the School of Metaphysics. And that's been a cornerstone in my life. I've had other education, but what I've been learning here recently and over the last few years has stemmed from my experience within the School of Metaphysics that actually was an opportunity that arose through dream memory. That's one of the things that I've learned about, is how to interpret dreams, how to be lucid in dreams, and how to understand what's going on beyond our conscious mind, with what some people understand as the subconscious mind. And so, thanks for having me here, Jay. This is an exciting opportunity for me.
So thanks for being on. So what got you into metaphysics and meditation?
Yeah, so probably what got me into it was the awareness that I was already having the experiences. It wasn't that something specific happened all of a sudden. It was more along the lines of what had been occurring for much of my life, really. And one of my first experiences that I can remember is having a friend's cousin pass away. There was this kid who lived where I lived. Chris was his name. He was several years younger than me. I don't know, about 7, 8, 9 years younger than me. So he was a kid to me. But he had been in many car wrecks before the time he was 8. I think he was 8 years old. And he had several different car wrecks and different car experiences. And finally, it was like the soul just wanted to leave. He was having a good life. It was really an interesting experience. He was a really good kid, but it just appeared that the soul just didn't want to be in the physical world, because he kept finding different reasons to get into car accidents and have different mistakes, life-threatening things, and he'd just laugh about it. It was just what he did. And then the last one that he got ran over by a truck crossing the street, and he did pass away. And so one of the first experiences I had was with him. When I was told, I was woken up by my mom that he had passed away. It was early in the morning, and she woke me up to tell me, because we lived in a small town and everybody knew, everybody. Town called Wynnewood, Oklahoma. And so she just, came and told me, and it was this immediate experience I had where I had as many people have had, this desire to be sad or angry or oh my God, look what happened to this kid, and I'm going to cry. And I actually had tears, and I cried a little bit while I was in bed. But then I had this almost immediate experience of Chris telling me that it was okay, of him coming to me in non-physical presence and just the awareness coming to me that he was fine, that there was nothing to be sad about. And all the way through that experience, the next 2 weeks, preparing for his funeral and everything, just talking to people about it, I had to kind of fake sadness and worry and concern, even though I knew that there was nothing to be worried or concerned about. I think I was a preteen at that time, and it was just an experience where I really woke up, where it woke me up and it showed me that there was something else going on that I had always known, but it was just an opportunity for it to like spark in my mind. And then I had several more experiences like that, just with speaking with entities, not knowing that they were entities. They could have been alien, or they could have been just disembodied humans passing away. It could have been people who were coming in. It could have been dream experiences, dream memories. I had all kinds of experiences as I was growing up that I didn't have really an explanation for, but I just knew that there was something that was beyond the physical that was wide awake and that I could make contact with. And so those were some of my first experiences. And then later on in life, I started to remember dreams. I, just like many other people, I smoked weed and, drank a lot and partied. Felt like that was the only thing that there was to do to have fun, that and sports, as I was growing up. So that was what I, wrapped my mind around. That's what I put my attention on. And I was drinking a lot, and I was smoking a lot of weed, doing a lot of different things. And one time when I was at college, I, was inebriated, and it was dusk. So maybe about 6 o'clock on a summer evening. And I was walking in my campus where I went to school, the University of Central Oklahoma. I was going to college there, and I was living on campus. And I left a friend's apartment and was just walking down the sidewalk. And I immediately had this experience of feeling into the atmosphere. It was as if it all turned opaque or gray. And I came to realize many years later that I had opened up to another dimension. And I looked up to my left, and I saw two, not orbs. I know a lot of people describe other, terrestrial entities as orbs, but these were not orbs. They were more like, they were almost like a slinky, or those, there's these balls that, they get bigger and smaller, like therapy type balls. And they have like, what is this? I don't know what the shape is. It's the shape of like a soccer ball, the shapes that'll be on a soccer ball, or like a stop sign. So there was a lot of those little shapes, and they were connected. And so it was like they could move in and out like this. And I saw there were two red orbs in that way, like red balls or red, I don't even know what to call them, baskets. That's what the word is coming to me right now. It was like they were baskets, like your basket that you have behind you. It was similar to that, like they were connected, but they could also move and breathe. It was as if they were breathing. And I saw two of them floating, and I noticed it, and I just stood there for however long they were there, just observing them. And I could tell they were alive, but they obviously had no kind of humanoid expression to them. But I could tell that they were alive, and they were just some orbs in a different dimension. And subsequent years went by, and I really didn't tell anybody about that experience. And I've had other experiences too, similar to that. But the telling of it it was something I kept quiet about for, I don't know, more than 20 years. And I felt open as I'd studied metaphysics and came to understand that there were other people like me, that I wasn't crazy, that this was, kind of a normal thing that people just didn't talk about because it was basically taught out of us. We were led to believe that it was crazy or demonic or, just not real. And so what brought me into the School of Metaphysics was an experience similar to that, but it was more where I just had remembered a dream and I wanted to understand it. And I saw a flyer that just was talking about dreams. It was put up by somebody from the School of Metaphysics, and they were advertising for what we call now, I've been a student and a teacher since 2008, so I can say we call the Dream Awareness Hotline. And so it was an experience where you could call and get your dreams interpreted. People from all over the world were doing this, and it started in the late 90s. And so that was about 2008, like I'm saying, maybe 2007, when I made that phone call, and this guy interpreted my dreams for me and helped me understand it. And I kind of came to understand then at that point the depth of what was available, the quality that was available, that I didn't have to be afraid anymore, and that there were more people in the world who understood what I wanted to know, and they could teach me and they could show me and they could lead me. And that dream interpretation and just the depth and the quality of talking and sharing and knowing that there was a spiritual connection that the person on the other end of the phone had with me that went beyond my general experiences of church and different things like that I'd had growing up. I knew that there was something deeper, and I knew that this specific conversation was never going to let me live life the same anymore. And at that point, I took, the dive. I'd already been taking time to read the Bible in different ways, and even still being a little bit of a pothead, I read some other books, Think and Grow Rich, and that was a time when Dr. Wayne Dyer was very active in the spiritual community, and so I was watching his videos and his PBS specials and reading some of his books, and listening to his CDs and his interviews. And Think and Grow Rich was a very strong element in my life. There's the last chapter of Think and Grow Rich is about I think he called them invisible counselors.
You're listening to the Inspire Me with Jay podcast. Please do like and subscribe to the channel, bringing hope and inspiration to the world.
So what I was saying is that there's a book, Napoleon Hill, he talks about invisible counselors. So in that book, that was an opening for me, a realization for me that there is something beyond the physical, and not just beyond the physical, but in all of its glory. And there's this experience, there's this other world, there's this other place, there's this other state, there's this other consciousness that anyone can tap into, because I can't consider myself special, although I know that I have a commission, I have a place in this world, I have a purpose, and I'm deepening, within the glory of fully being patient and aware and understanding what that is. It's a really magnificent experience, a magnificent expression of my existence and my life and my understanding and the depth of who I am that I'm becoming awake to. And so through these experiences of the invisible counselors, I would actually smoke, a little bit, and then I would read the Bible, and I could hear the Bible. I could understand the Bible in a very different way. And I had a couple of other experiences, but I was living in this apartment, and I'd actually came to the apartment by the same way. Like, all of these experiences were basically setting me up for, it seemed like, the same thing. It was all connected. Everything was connected, but every experience I had also, I didn't know. I wasn't able to be completely conscious and aware. And I think that was to my benefit, this experience of forgetting or just not knowing, what's going on. And so I was living with my parents and, my mom and the guy she had married, and I did not want to be there. I'd messed up, got myself kicked out of an apartment. And so in that experience, I didn't want to live there, but I was doing all I could. Yeah. So in that experience, I was doing all I could to stay focused on my goals. And at that time, one of my goals was to absolutely not be living with my parents. And so I didn't have a car, but I was determined. And when I moved in, my mom was like really hard on me at that time. And she was saying, you got to make sure you got somewhere to stay. How long are you going to live here? How long you want to do this? And I was just like, leave me alone. I'm just trying to think, I'm trying to move in. I'm trying to get all my stuff in. And it's not like I had that much stuff, but there was this experience of the pressure that she put on me that caused me to wake up. And she said, how long, she asked me like 2 or 3 times, how long are you going to be here? And it just hit me. I said, 2 months. I said, 60 days. I'm gone. I'm leaving in 60 days, and she pretty much accepted that and, let me kind of get on with my life in that way. And so I had a fairly okay job. It wasn't great, but it was pretty good. Worked at a hospital where I had lots of experiences there as well, with, connecting with entities and people who had passed away and, caring and pushing. I was what we called an orderly at that time. And so I was a transporter where I would move people around. And so sometimes those people had left their bodies. And so I was able to experience that, watching someone actually expire. I had lots of different experiences like that. And again, connecting with the soul, connecting with the depth of the spirit was always an experience. And so this particular experience, I told my mom 60 days, and I said, I'm out of here in 60 days. And it came time, I didn't even, the bed, her guest bed that I slept in, I never even turned the cover down. It was summer, so I didn't have to worry about it, that much. And I never turned the cover down. I put like this little bitty blanket over me, and that's how I slept. And I would sleep and get up and get out of there and go to work. And for 60 days, that was what I did, and it was a contentious experience because I was old enough to take care of myself, but I got myself into some kind of trouble, financially, and I didn't know what to do. I wasn't aware or clear enough on how to operate within the financial world. So that was a time frame that I needed to kind of get more clear on where I was going. I was in my early 20s. And so what I did was vow that, yes, I would be out of here in 60 days. And the time came where I had to go look for an apartment. About a week, was coming up, for these 60 days that I had guaranteed, myself, first and foremost, that I was going to have my own things that I needed. I was going to have my own apartment. I was going to be good. I saved the money and I was ready, but I still didn't know where I was going to go. And so I got on the bus, and as I was riding the bus, I had an experience where I just kind of lost my state of consciousness and got off the bus and didn't know where I was. I was kind of in a daze. And I realized that as I was walking, that I was not leading myself, that there was something else that was leading me. And I realized that it was a guide that was leading me. And I turned on this street and I turned on that street, and I was just walking, and I did not know where I was going. And I looked up. When I kind of woke up, I looked over and saw a sign for an apartment complex that was called Destiny Apartments. And I was like, oh, well, I guess this is the place. I've set myself up for this. This is it. So I go into Destiny Apartments, I get an apartment, and I called that place my ashram, that small 1-bedroom apartment. And it was here where I really started to go deeper into myself. I decided I would stop drinking. I kept doing a little bit of marijuana, but not that much. I was really using it strategically. I didn't understand what microdosing was, but that's what I was doing at that time. I was no longer, blasting my mind completely out. And so I was having different experiences. I was able to be more awake to what was going on. I was using it medicinally, if you want to call it that, or microdosing, which is what we call it now. So through that experience, reading Think and Grow Rich, reading the Bible, actually connecting with the Spirit of Jesus Christ, and moving my attention through the invisible counselors and the other parts of that book that were very moving and beneficial, I was able to wake up and start to channel. And I would write sometimes, and I would just be writing. I was already a writer and an actor, and I felt, that this was an opportunity for me to really relax and go deep within myself. I wanted to know who I was. I wanted to understand. I was still angry. I'd been angry all the way through my childhood, living in kind of a, not a very racially diverse. There was a lot of struggle there. And so I built up just throughout my life in general, my parents getting a divorce when I was younger, not feeling like I was getting what I wanted all the way through my childhood. And then actually now coming to a point where I felt like I was an adult and that I could create my own life. That also resulted in anger. And so I had to work through that. I had to work through forgiveness for my family, forgiveness for many people in my life that I just held grudges against in nonsensical ways. And so those experiences then pressured me again, just the same way as my mother pressured me into growing my awareness, slowly but surely. I didn't consider myself really an alcoholic, but I knew I needed to stop drinking because I was blacking out and having different experiences that were just not high quality experiences. They were scary to a certain extent and exciting, although I knew that it just was time for me to let it go. And so I was able to just stop drinking pretty much cold turkey. I've been drinking for about 19 years at that point. I was able to stop that and find clarity, within my body and within my ability to relax. And so I started to channel. I would write. And as I was writing, I would have these moments where I would become aware again, just like the guy that led me to that apartment. As I sat in that apartment, that there was somebody else writing, that there was someone using my hand. And I now have lots of notebooks and, volumes of ideas and thoughts and things that I know are not mine. I don't have a specific origin necessarily or a name or things of that nature for all of these entities, because there has been throughout my life so many of them. And so this is what has kind of led me to where I am now, because about a year after that is when I made that phone call to the School of Metaphysics and got my dreams interpreted, and realized that there was somebody out there who could actually lead me and help me to get to the point of the depth that I really wanted, to really clearly understand who I am, what humanity is for, what the purposes are of spiritual reality, spiritual work, dreams, meditation, things of that nature, then became far more clear to me as I practiced, as I did spiritual exercises, and as I found people who needed teaching and who wanted to be taught, and I became a teacher and knew that I could then help more and more and more people. But guess what? Throughout all this experience, I had one thing that was plaguing me in a way that was excruciating physical pain. I had this giant knot in my back. I must have had a basketball, football injury. I'm not sure what it was, but throughout my entire 20s, 30s, I had to deal with this giant knot in my lower back and on the left side. And it was just excruciating. Sometimes the pain would go all the way down my leg and all the way up to my head and my jaws and my neck and my eyes, and I would get headaches. And it was all about this tension that I held in my lower back that I could not let go of. I don't know if I pulled a muscle or what it was, but it lasted for far too long to be like a normal kind of injury. So it was something that was really deep. And I stretched and I got massages and I did yoga, I did everything I could, but I could never actually get this particular pain cleared. And so this is one of the apexes of my experience, was healing this. And I had friends who were yoga, enthusiasts and yoga instructors. And one of them, I went and did hot yoga. They took me to do hot yoga twice. And that was kind of the start of the realization that there was something that was going on. I was like, maybe I can finally let this go. It wasn't even a point of conversation. I didn't even really talk about it. I kept it kind of a secret because I was a little bit ashamed. And so going through that experience, hot yoga kind of helped me open up a little bit. And I did some other yoga experiences, and it was helping me to be more aware, to be more clear about what was going on in my body. But that wasn't quite enough. And this another friend invited me to come to a free breathwork session. They were training to be a breathwork practitioner, and they needed people to just practice with. And so I came to this experience still with this knot in my back, but feeling like there was maybe some way out of this. And I came into this breathwork experience and spent probably, we probably breathed for over an hour. I just laid on the floor and just breathed. And I was able to go into another different kind of state of consciousness where I'd communicated with, of all things, some kind of tree entity. And it was a tree, but it was also, I was able to communicate with it. And we had an experience, and it's not a super clear experience as to what the conversation or, what the depth of this was, but there was a sense of power and strength and strengthening that came away from that experience. And as I came out of, they ended the breathwork session. They had music playing. We ended that session, and I again had less pain, less focus, still pretty sharp. I was still fully aware that there was a pain there, but I started to wake up to how I could heal it, that it could experience, including a couple of massage experiences, was a self-hypnosis. So again, I had another friend invite me to a free self-hypnosis session. She wanted to get into hypnosis. She had somebody coming from California to teach her, and she had to have a certain number of people for this teacher to actually come. And so she got her numbers together, and I was one of those people. Came to a library. As soon as I walked in, I was sensitive enough to feel the energy and the shift in the energy field, knowing that there was something here that was different. As soon as I walked in the door, even though I was in a library, I could tell that there was some kind of Reiki energy or something had been expressed into this room. And I could tell that there was something very powerful. And so I just kept my attention on that. I did not know what self-hypnosis really was at that time. And so I was, again, just open. And I came in, sat down. She introduced herself. About 5 minutes later, she starts putting us through the self-hypnosis. I almost want to say trip, because it's kind of like, a trip, it was really like that. It was a journey. And it's not what I expected. And she led us through this experience of going to the place that we really loved, somewhere in our consciousness that we could go. And it was, for me, it was a place where there was just the most beautiful green foliage and, beautiful trees. I love nature. I'm an elemental person. And there was like a lake there, or a stream of some kind. And there were trees. And as I went into that experience, I sat down and put my back on one of the trees. And this was probably a 15-minute experience. She let us stay there and then led us to come back to where we were, back to our bodies. And without putting attention on the pain, it was more like it was a suggestion. I do remember her say something about healing. So there was like this kind of hypnotic suggestion. And so as I was in that state, I'm not sure what she was saying, because I was deeply embedded in my own mind and the depths of my consciousness. And as I relaxed on that, with my back to that tree, there was the healing had taken place. And once I came back into my body, I no longer had that particular pain. And like I said, it had been there for something like 20 years. It was really, really amazing. And I'm feeling that quality of gratitude right now that really opened me up to a new reality and a new focus. And once I had that healing, it was kind of like a phantom experience. You may have heard about people losing limbs and they could still have pain, like if they lost their hand. It's almost like they can still feel their hand and it still hurts. So it was something like that for maybe a week or two, where I didn't have the pain, but I psychologically thought I had the pain. And over time, it worked itself out and basically went away. And there was nothing. I even went to doctors, and I had one doctor like kick me out of his office, made me really, to the point where I'm really where I am now. I don't hardly trust doctors. I don't want to go to a hospital. I don't want to go to a doctor for anything, because he literally was like telling me there's nothing wrong with you. You need to get out of here. You're a young man. You can't have any problems with your back. Don't invite this. And maybe that was to my benefit to a certain extent, because what's the next step in the Western medicine is just to give you a bunch of pills, right? So instead of going that route, he kicked me out basically. And so I kept dealing with it and kept trying to figure it out. But once I opened myself up to the spiritual reality, this was an experience that I really needed. And it really changed everything for me when I realized that I could consciously heal myself. There was a way that I could heal my physical body, that I didn't have to take medicine. I don't have to go to a doctor. If I break my arm or something like that, or if I do lose a limb, that's a whole different story, right? But talking about these other things that are more manageable within the body, I understand that now. I understand how to move energy through my body. I was probably one of the most angry people again during COVID, because I was not going to wear a mask. Guess how many masks I bought? 0. I walked around the world knowing that I had nothing to do with COVID. There was no COVID in me. There was no COVID for me. COVID was not for me. And I knew it wasn't. So I did not concern myself with it in the least. And I sometimes forgot. I would walk into stores or walk into places and realize that I'm the only one not wearing a mask and people are looking at me like they want to shoot me or something, you know, but that was my life. And I knew I wasn't going to get sick, and I never did really get sick. Not like a lot of other people. I had no fear about that. And that's been my setup for, quite a while. Actually, that's just been how I've lived. And spattered throughout my experiences, drinking, blacking out, I almost walked off. These are what I call near-death experiences. They're not traditional, but coming to the awareness of walking, out in the woods somewhere and realizing that I was about to walk off a small, mountain or a hill, and probably not live, this nighttime tumble, through this experience, and waking up and seeing that and being like, wait a minute, or passing out on the street and waking up one day and realizing, I don't know where I've been, waking up in my own bed, not knowing how I got there, waking up in somebody else's bed, waking up on somebody's couch, waking up on somebody's floor, having these blackout experiences, but being taken care of the whole time. But once when I was 11, I did have what you could call a traditional near-death experience where I was flirting with this girl, messing with this girl, and I jumped on the back of her truck. There's these old Chevrolet trucks. Remember those trucks that have these real big balls on the back of them? I don't know what the name of it is, but it had a real prominent ball for the hitch, right? And so I'm jumping on the back of this girl's truck and shaking it and messing with her and, whatever. And then she decides, I'm going to take off and drive this, he's probably going to jump off in a minute. And I stayed on. I didn't jump off. And I was kind of worried about jumping off because she started driving faster and faster. And I was like, okay, I can do this. And my friends were with me and they were yelling, jump, jump, jump. And with the worst kind of perfection, the time I decide to jump, the car is going down a hill. And I was just tall enough, and the hill was just perfect enough to hit me right square on my head where I still have a little indentation. And I hit that, and I was kind of like, in a daze for a second. I could hear people say, hey, are you all right? And that was it. I was out. And I was, knocked out. And I woke up on a gurney in a certain way, being led to the, emergency room. And I was awake to a certain extent, but I was also not awake. I could tell that I was in between, a sense of physical reality and subconscious reality, or the depths of understanding the inner levels of mind. I could tell that I was in this space where I could go either way. If I would have just let go, I would have either went into a coma or I would have left the physical. I'm not 100% sure, but I could fully tell that I had a choice, and I decided to stay awake. And there was several minutes where I could feel choice was present for me. And I made sure that I stayed awake, and that was another one of my earlier experiences that kind of set me up for the experiences that I've been having now, with more channeling, connecting with specifically Palladians. And just yesterday, actually, I had an experience of giving a message to a group of people at a drum circle, where we drummed up some spirits, and, there was an opportunity there for us to connect. And, we all were able to have a very, very deep experience, but there was something super specific that this kind of a Native American energy and this connection of the Palladians was present. And I've made contact with them before. I've seen 3 UFOs that were all Palladian. And so I've just been having lots of really deep, experiences that go beyond the norm, and open me up to what is now becoming my norm. So that's a lot. I have no idea. I'm just, talking, is there something you want to ask me or anything?
So, what do you do now? You do you teach metaphysics, but do you teach breath work and meditation and stuff like that?
I do. The organization is a not-for-profit. The School of Metaphysics is. And so I do it, but I don't get paid for it with them, you know? So I'll have experiences of setting up classes. I teach what we call the mastery of consciousness. And through that process of being a student and a teacher simultaneously, where I'm also a director and I also lead our efforts toward global peace. So I have these different roles, but I've been a student since 2008 and I've been a teacher since 2008 in this same organization within the same class. This class involves concentration, it involves meditation, being a still-minded meditation. So people, I think nowadays, the word meditation has gotten a bit confused with guided visualization, which is more like the self-hypnosis experience. So when I say meditation and when I think about meditation and the experiences I've had with it, it's more like, for me, a Zen type of meditation, something that you would see in a Buddhist temple where you're just quiet. You just close your eyes and you just still your mind. And there's this experience that is going to be yours. It's not an ordered experience. It's not a directed experience. And so that's the kind of meditation that I've been doing for, these many years and teaching for these many years. And through that process, I began to notice people, need something. Everybody can't just do that. That's a hard road for a lot of people to just be quiet. People need to have some kind of stimulation, So I've developed a process that I can take people through that I call inner mind light. Sometimes I'll play a singing bowl, and let people relax and give them something else to put their attention on rather than just their own stillness. And so through that experience, I've been able to witness and understand and receive other people's light and help them to be able to direct that. Within the School of Metaphysics, we basically understand light as being awareness. And so as you put your attention on what you contemplate as light, then you can move that light, which is really just an awareness, through your body. And that's basically what I did to heal myself. And that's what I've been helping other people to understand and be able to do themselves. A lot of that work has been on my own because the School of Metaphysics has a very specific curriculum, and it's helped me to open up to my own talents and my own abilities. The channeling and the things of that nature are not things that are taught in the School of Metaphysics. We don't actually teach Reiki. What we teach is something that is very basic to every human, which is the ability to concentrate and control your thoughts. And this leads to emotional understanding, emotional clarity, and it leads to the ability to connect with universal laws, and anything else that you want to create in your life can spur from that experience. So we teach the basics of meditation, visualization, and concentration.
So, basically, it's similar to teaching like meditation, and then,
a lot of people, I think, in 2026, there's so many things out there right now, right? There's so many different ways that people are learning how to help each other. So again, it is teaching meditation. The only difference I would say is it's more teaching how to think. So in meditation, you have different experiences that are similar to dreams. In a guided visualization, you have different experiences that are similar to dreams. And these experiences are really just you waking up to the inner experience and the inner quality where you can see colors, you can see aspects of yourself which manifest as people or trees or cars or a lake, whatever it might be. These images that you see in your mind are really just a reflection of what you are. So all of us have this experience of seeing something, feeling something, knowing something, but we externalize it sometimes. And so the goal that I'm with right now within myself and within the school is to help more and more people understand that all of this is just a reflection of the self. Every experience that we're having, every part of the physical world that we observe, everything that we experience within our mind is a reflection of the self, capital S, self, the wholeness that we actually are. So separation is not real. That you may have heard, or you may have this your own experience with knowing that we are all one. Although it's very hard to maintain that for a long period of time, to maintain that awareness. And living in the illusion actually offers us an opportunity to learn and build new understandings. So it's not evil to work with separation. The benefit, the greatest benefit, is knowing that we're living in this kind of state of illusion. And you don't allow it then to go into a delusion. And that's what I've seen with a lot of people, you know, God bless them, who have had near-death experiences, and even people who are religious. There's a kind of a relationship that they don't want, that the near-death experiencers don't want to necessarily admit to, but they religify near-death experiences just as much as any, you know, Christian or Hindu might treat their own religion as being the only way, or the depth of understanding is only here in this particular dogma, whatever it might be for many different people. So in the teaching of meditation, I don't take that lightly, because that's an important soul connection that can be made that then goes beyond anything that we've ever been taught or anything that has ever been written. The depth of the self goes beyond all of that. And so when you can really slow down the physical world and begin to still your mind, and you become aware that there is an illusion and the benefit of the illusion, and you don't allow yourself to fall into a delusion, instead you stay awake.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my focus.
Basically what you do is, yeah.
That's what I do.
So
yeah.
Basically, yeah. So like, what other kind of things are you working on? Any other projects or anything? You do the School of Metaphysics.
I have We Are Valuable Media, which social media. I don't know if you know this or not, but yesterday there was this landmark court case where Google and Facebook really had to own that their product is focused on addiction. you know, and you know, they got to pay, or you know how court cases go. They're going to repeal, but right now it looks like they're going to have to pay like $275 million or something like that to one person, because they lost this court case that specifically says yes, they are causing addiction on purpose. That was their whole goal. And I can't say that I completely agree with that, but I mean, in the relationship of what I'm doing with my life now, I just recently started getting paid by Meta, you know, so I've been posting since 2011 with something that I called We Are Valuable Media. It's just an idea that I came up with, a hashtag, if you want to call it that. And then I turned it into a page. I turned it into a YouTube channel. But We Are Valuable Media is really just an idea that we are all valuable. And the media that I want to produce, or the way that I produce my media, meaning interviews, books that I'm writing. I'm actually writing a book, and this is not an easy subject that I'm describing right now to write about. So it's taken me quite a while to really feel comfortable with what I'm writing and think that it's actually connecting with what I want to connect with. And then every day I have new experiences, and I want to write about these new experiences. So this book is just, will it ever be completed? I don't know. At least I'm behind George R.R. Martin. You know, I'm not setting people up like that, you know, to think that there's going to be a book written and he's probably going to die without ever writing this book. But I hope I don't have that experience. But I am working on writing a book. But We Are Valuable Media it's like, so the social media experience, anybody who really cares about the world or about life knows that social media has its downfalls, you know, that it's dangerous in lots of different ways. And so whenever I came into social media, of course, I'm 47, so it was not like something that I had as a kid. You know, I started to look at it and I was like, this is stupid. I'm not going to do this. I didn't, you know, Facebook, whatever, you know, and so I was not going to do it. And then there was an experience that I had of fear that this was the only way that I could connect with my family and all the people that I went to school with. And I mean, how else would I be connected? And so I had a, you know, FOMO experience. And so I stuck with it, but then it's kept getting more and more negative. You know, people would talk about people like they weren't real. You know, they would make these posts, these hateful posts, and it's just a lot of anger. And I can't say that I'm a saint in any way, shape, or form, but I did not want to be a part of that. And so through that desire, I was able to create something that now I call We Are Valuable Media. So whenever I post on Facebook and Instagram and Threads and TikTok, I'm posting We Are Valuable Media. I'm not just posting to be posting. I'm not, I'm always focusing my attention on moving energy toward happiness and gratitude and joy and growth and spiritual health. And so that's, again, my focus. I really have a hard time living what we could call a normal life, so to speak. I need to be in a higher state. I need to interact with people. I need to have jobs. I need to be around energy fields that are higher vibration than what we could consider normal. I oftentimes do go into the norm. I mean, I eat ice cream and hamburgers. It's not like I'm, a monk or something. But at the same time, I always am focused on spiritualizing my experiences, raising the vibration, feeling the connection to all that is. I'm not afraid to say, God, I want to master myself and my life. And in that way, I'm allowing things that are the highest, that are higher than I could ever imagine, to then move through my consciousness and my experience. And the wisdom and the guidance that is present opens me up to a new reality. And there's a sense of joy and focus and connection that goes beyond a need to prove anything. It's an experience of knowing, being present in the love, being one with the presence of God, nature, reality, health, non-judgmental experiences, non-dual experiences. I have people who I consider teachers now, Daniel Condren, who is not well known, but he's one of my direct teachers, and, Adi Shanti and Ramesh Balkazar and Ramana Maharshi and Nisargadatta Maharaj and Rupert Spira and David Hawkins and those types of people who I'm, the Hugging Saint, Babaji. That's where my consciousness is. It's my desire is to create a new reality, but to always know that there's a connection to all, that there's not a better than or a worse than. There's just knowing and existing within the soul and within the greater reality of who we really are, without judgment, without detachment. Instead, there's a sense of connection to the all and to the greater reality than what is physical, and knowing that there's also the reincarnational cycle, and that I'm going to leave this body, I'm going to withdraw, but I'm going to learn everything I need to learn before that happens. I'm not going to miss out on anything. And when I return, if I return back into physical presence, it will be an experience that I need and that I want. I'll have experiences and communication within the inner levels. The near-death experience provides that depth for a lot of people, clarity for a lot of people. I don't require the near-death experience to know that I am loved, to know that God and Jesus and Buddha and all that is always available to me. That the spirit of my grandmother and the spirit of my favorite dog will always exist. I don't have to die in order to have that experience. I definitely don't have to have a clinical death, because that's not full death and that's not full releasing. That's partial. So that experience is not full. It's not the wholeness of what we need to do when we do regenerate, when we withdraw and we regenerate back into the physical experience. There's a depth and a clarity that goes along with that, that goes beyond words. It goes beyond conscious mind memory. And it's the most fulfilling reality that there is. It is what is reality. It's not what is thought of to be that experience. What's thought about to be that experience can never actually fully match the truth of what that really is. So it's always a step. There's not a finality. There's always steps. Steps in, steps out, steps over, steps up, steps down, steps around. it doesn't matter. 360 degrees, the movement is always there. There's always a presence of reality. There's always a presence of God, and the energy of awareness is always present. And we are all living in that same presence, having different experiences, different awarenesses, different perspectives, different realizations that are of that same experience. It's just a different expression that I have, that everyone else has, of the actual whole. So we're all always connected. We're all always one, but we have different experiences, and there's joy and beauty in that.
Yeah, well, thanks for coming on today. Where can people reach you if they want to get a hold of you?
If you Google We Are Valuable Media, you'll find me and you'll find some of my friends. And you could go to my YouTube channel, which is called We Are Valuable Media. You could Google my name,